Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 17th edition of Williamson County School Board. Board members, if you would please record your attendance if you haven't as yet done so. And then we'd like to stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence. If we could have Sergeant David Brewer come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Heritage Middle School for being here under choral director Lisa Benton. They had a wonderful program for us. Really appreciate them being here this evening. Our first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Hullett. Second by Ms. McGraw. Any discussions, comments, questions? I see none. Are we set up to do it? Okay, just do a voice vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. When we approve the consent agenda, we approve the school board meeting minutes from September 19th. We approve board policy editorial edition 6.3032 on bullying. We approve board policy on second reading 1.400 regular meetings and board meeting preparation. We approve board policy 1.703 school attendance area zoning and non-resident students. We approve the recommendation for field trip fee requests. We approve the sick leave bank trustees. We approve the CTE textbook adoption committee. The next item we have is items of particular public interest, which is public comment. This evening we have 11 people signed up to speak to us. The board established a 30-minute time limit. Board members, since there's 11, are you all okay with 3 minutes still for everyone to speak this evening? We good with that? Okay, we have Ms. McGraw has the timer this evening. The timer was broke last time, so now Ann has got it in her capable hands to keep time on it. And I'll read the names as they come up, and they would please state your name and address and what your subject is, and then you'll have the 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker is Jim Goodlow. Would you please come to the mic, please?
Thank you. My name is Jim Goodlow. I live at 179 Carenbridge Way in Franklin. We'll speak on the subject of student religious liberty. Not only am I a resident of Williamson County, I also serve as vice chairman of the board of Family Policy Alliance, a national organization that focuses, that has as part of its mission the very protection of religious liberty. I want to thank you for considering this. It's really very important. It's very critical what you're considering tonight. Now, some might argue that, or say that it's redundant. After all, we've got the Constitution that speaks to it. We've got a state law passed in 1997 that speaks to it. I would argue, though, that what this policy you're considering tonight does is provide clarification. And clarification is very important, particularly when you're dealing with an organization with as many as employees as Williamson County Schools has, and with as many constituents, students, families, parents, etc., that Williamson County Schools has. This policy is your opportunity to clarify exactly what it means and exactly how it will be addressed in Williamson County Schools. You can remove any ambiguity. You can remove any questions by passing this policy that you're considering tonight. Thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Debbie Deaver. Deaver.
This is for a tall person. Thank you all for being here this evening and saving me from dancing from with the stars. But I live at 1800 Gray Point Drive in Brentwood. When Governor Haslam signed the Religious Viewpoints Anti-Discrimination Act into law in March of 2014, at the state level, there was a lot of head scratching. You know, why are we protecting laws that we are already protected by? The intent of the law was not to protect rights that we already have, but to document them so that people like the ACLU would stop suing us and winning lawsuits in Tennessee. The Democratic sponsors of the bill, Senator Roy Heron and State Rep Craig Fitchum, got it. Publicly, they said, in the past decade, we personally have heard literally hundreds of people saying they've taken God out of the public schools, and the Supreme Court has prohibited prayer in school. These are myths. They're not constitutional law, but they were widely held beliefs. While the Declaration of Rights was a noble endeavor, it really wasn't the whole intent. It was the cherry on top. It wasn't the bottom line at all. The ACLU had filed 3 successful religious liberty lawsuits in Tennessee schools from 2008 to 2011. I think that your attorney would probably agree with me. A well-defined policy is a great defense against lawsuits. The ACLU has not signed any additional lawsuits in the state of Tennessee since the bill was the law was enacted. Not saying they're not going to, but they haven't so far. Clearly defining on a local level what religious liberties look like for students, teachers, and staff in your employee manual is a preventive measure in a highly litigious society. There are groups out there, they're just waiting for you to misstep. In every HR handbook in this country, they explain what the Anti-Discrimination Equal Employment Opportunity Act is. And does anybody really think that's for the employees? No, it's to protect the employer. A policy on religious liberty is no different. You're protecting the taxpayers and you're protecting the students and the teachers in Williamson County with that. Taking proactive measures to avoid a lawsuit is just really being a good steward of the taxpayers' money. There's not a downside. Tonight, if you decide to vote against this policy, it is for some reason other than protecting our schools, parents, teachers, and students. So I thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Pam Prevost.
Hello, my name is Pam Prevost. I reside at 6216 Belle Reeve Drive. And I want to thank all of you on the board for allowing this to go through the work session to Thursday night to proceed on to tonight for a vote so that the community can give some input. I am very grateful for Dr. Beth Burgos and also Jason Golden for doing such hard work on this and coming up with these proposals that will really benefit our Williamson County school community. The reason that I feel like these are really important is basically what's already been said, is that there is confusion and things are not clear about what our religious liberty rights are and are not. And I think this would be such a huge benefit, not just to faculty and teachers, but also to students as well as families. So I hope that you will consider this, and just wanted to commend you, Dr. Looney, for what you said Thursday night about that you feel like that you teach the principals and teachers these types of things and you educate them on these religious liberty policies. I'm wondering what is being done to educate the students. What is out there for them to resource, to have access to be able to know what their religious liberty rights are and are not. I think that they are also to be considered. Also, even with the training that's provided, there's still misinformation with teachers. I talked to a friend of mine Thursday morning who told me that her fellow teachers were told by their supervising teacher that they were not allowed to say Merry Christmas. So there still is misinformation. Wouldn't it be wonderful if this were a part of policy that teachers and students and parents could easily access? How wonderful it would be for students to understand this, and how awful it would be for students to be confused about this, to where you might have a child that's not of faith making fun of another child, a Muslim child bringing their Quran to school, or a Jewish child wearing their Star of David, or a Christian child bringing a Bible to school. Wouldn't this be of service to the students, to where they would have greater respect and understanding of what other children's faith and rights are? Wouldn't it help to eliminate misunderstanding and possible bullying or harassment of other students that could be a real problem? I just see this as a win-win situation. I know I'm over my time now, and I'll just close by saying I do feel like this would help prevent future lawsuits by making it clear what the boundaries are, also things that cannot be done. I think that's very important. As far as the TSBA language that Ms. McGraw and Ms. Durham were concerned about, surely that can
Ms.
all be
Prevost,
worked out in a policy
time is up,
committee
please.
meeting.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to say that the past school board chairman, PJ Mesera,
Ma'am,
is
your
so
time is
for
up.
this.
Please respect what we've
Yes.
allotted.
And
Thank you for
Yes,
speaking.
thank you so much for all the hard work that you do to make this a wonderful school community for all of us.
Thank you.
I certainly do appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Meg Reeser.
Which one? This one? This?
That one.
Thank you. I am Meg Risser. I live at 1235 Mulberry Street in Franklin. And I am here not as a parent, never was blessed that way, but I have been a teacher for over 30 years. I have taught all over the world. I've taught and traveled all over the world, from Africa and many places in this country. A little bit about let me say ditto to all the above. That will clear up that they've said that part. I'm here representing myself as a believer and also as a teacher who still, even though I'm retired, represents diversity to the children in my neighborhood, in my church, my community, wherever I'm blessed to be. I was an early childhood arts educator, arts and music educator for all those years. I taught publicly and privately. I've led workshops on the topic endlessly, and as a proud American, so thrilled to recognize my position in the world as an individual and then a citizen of this country and our freedom. In this day of imminent threat to religious liberty, policy needs to be clear and it needs to be written. I have found a promised land here in Franklin where I think that I can live joyfully. I'm in a Habitat house, Habitat for Humanity. I continue to play with the children who come to my home, where we play instruments and games from all around the world. And I want that kind of freedom in truth and honesty to be continued and represented for the children that I have part ownership in and certainly passionate love for the parents and the caregivers, and the teachers with whom I have part ownership and cherished love for. Please vote for continuing this policy, for making this policy clear and permanent. Do not stench in your energies toward that. There is no excuse, in my personal opinion, for not doing so. I will say I've also taught Baha'i people, Jewish children, privileged to be in those communities, preschool teachers, church people of all different denominations. So I pretty well covered it all in my experiences, my appreciation for community's diversity, but let's don't cut short our religious freedom on which we were first founded, actually, the very first premise this country was begun for. And thank you, and I will end by saying shalom, and God bless.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Amy Wells.
Hello, I'm Amy from 303 Gillette Drive, Franklin, Tennessee, and that's going to be a hard act to follow, but I will try. It's common knowledge to me that many of us do not truly understand the intent and meaning of what Thomas Jefferson meant when he said separation of church and state. This has led to misunderstanding and confusion about the issue of religious liberty rights for all faiths in public schools. For example, a while back when I was on a committee making themed baskets to be sold at a school as a fundraiser, this basket was a Christmas book basket, and Mother sent an email stating she needed more. She had enough of Frosty, it was the night before Christmas, so forth. One mom responded, "Can it be Christian?" That took me back. It was a Christmas book basket, and they wanted to know if it could be Christian. That's when I started paying attention and listening to other friends, and many different other examples have come up. Dr. Burgos's and Mr. Golden's policies, which contain 2 existing policies with add-ons, additional information, and 2 new policies, outline religious freedom rights for students, teachers, and all in Williamson County employees, and that would go a long way towards making those rights much more clear for everyone. I attended your work session this week, Thursday night, and I heard our superintendent and board members frankly admit that teachers probably haven't read the entire policy manual and likely may not know the law regarding religious liberty rights. We all can understand that. Our teachers have a more challenging job each and every year with many demands on their time. As a result, teachers rely on the principal or other teachers to communicate to them on these sensitive issues. It's been my observation as a result of no clear policy and the miscommunications, misinformation, and misunderstandings that have and are occurring about what is permissible and what is not, and this varies from school to school, teacher to teacher, and principal to principal. This is too important of a hard-fought American right not to put it into district policy. That way all can see this for themselves with no room for confusion and doubt. Other examples of infringement of religious liberties in our county involving myself or friends are my own 5th grader at the time took his Bible to school for personal reading time that the class was having that day, and he was told by the teacher he could not bring it back as it wasn't a chapter book. There are chapters in the Bible. A friend who was new to teaching in the county put a scripture on her classroom wall, and another teacher came in and told her she could not post it and had to take it down. She did research on her own and says she's going to be putting it back up, but she is unique, I think. Another friend had held a Bible club after school for students to easily stay and be picked up later. This went on without a problem. Then, not sure if a new principal came or what was the issue, they were told they could not meet there anymore, so transportation became a problem to get kids to a place and then back home. Lastly, an art teacher at an elementary school was asked why the master artists weren't covered, and the reply was that they were mostly commissioned to do religious works, and that was not allowed. Given that the religious liberties are First Amendment rights of our U.S. Constitution, it is actually a history lesson in itself. The only argument I heard voiced at work session was that the district would be at risk of lawsuit if the policy is word for word with state law. That doesn't make sense at all.
Time is up, please.
Okay,
Please wrap it
I'm
up
just going to wrap it.
quickly.
Since one of the co-authors was our own school board attorney, I believe certainly he would know and he wouldn't put forth a policy that would potentially cause a lawsuit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Our next speaker is Paul Warren.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Warren. I live at 1804 Harpers River Drive in Brentwood. I'm a resident here in Williamson County, a Christian, and unlike many here, My educational background is a little more diverse. My education actually began in Cape Town, South Africa, during the very end of the apartheid era there under the British system. I also learned in the international system in Nairobi, and the majority of my education was here locally and relates to what we're voting on today. In each education system, one universal factor that often defines how well a student demographic learns and progresses is their ability to change and adapt to it. Unfortunately, most students simply don't know how to exercise change or changes in the system and how to express their religious liberties. They may learn how to learn a new sport. We saw a lot of students in here that recently learned how to sing and did an amazing job. They may learn a second language, respond to emergencies. But if you were to ask a student about anything regarding what they may believe or may not believe or how to express their liberties, they often don't know what to say, don't say anything, or express themselves in a way that represents a culture that could infringe on other people's beliefs without intention. Ignoring this topic breeds a generation of silence and apathy. Students learn to avoid rather than develop how to relate to one another and respect each other's beliefs. The policy we're talking about today is not a policy of orthodoxy or helping to indoctrinate what a student should believe. Rather, this relates more to orthopraxis, meaning how to act out what you believe within the confines of your civil liberties. The purpose of the Student Religious Liberties Policy is to further clarify free speech, prevent misguidance and misinterpretation of religious expressions. Williamson County and the greater Nashville area continue to develop rapidly, and with this development, our overall demographics for students across the board will become more diverse, not less, and it's up to us as a community to be able to help to plan and put the policies in place so that we're not just responding on a case-by-case basis. While the Student Religious Liberty Act of 1997, the Tennessee Student Religious Liberty Act of 1998, Employee Relations of 1998, and the Discrimination Act of 2014 all contribute and I think move us in the right direction. This is an ever-evolving conversation that we have to continue to adapt to. Refusing to pass this policy will inevitably halt the progress of helping students learn how to relate to each other and the broader community that will become more diverse. If we don't teach each other and teach our students how to respect each other's beliefs, we are choosing to teach them to ignore the issue of religious liberty, and students will simply learn to ignore each other. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Kim Sarubi. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
You did.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kim Sarubi. I'm at 6343 Williams Grove Drive in Brentwood. What we say to our children, the behavior we model, and how we support them is so important. It's why we cannot support dress codes that perpetuate rape culture. Like when we tell our daughters their school dress code says they cannot wear shorts, skirts, or dresses shorter than 5 inches from the middle of their knee, because wearing clothing that is too revealing or suggestive causes too much of a distraction for other students. It is why it's not okay for a school administrator wearing leggings while telling parents their children cannot wear yoga pants or leggings, and half the moms in the room are wearing them. The fact is, it's hard to even find clothes for my daughter that fit into the dress code. At Old Navy's $5 sale, there were no pants, shorts, skirts, tank tops, or dresses that didn't break the BMS dress code. As I read through the dress code, I realized, even though it doesn't specifically say male or females, it is clear. They are singling out the girls, and this has been confirmed as I talk with other students and parents. Overwhelmingly, it's the girls that get dress coded. The problem is not just that there's unequal treatment, but the logic behind the difference. Through this logic, schools make it the girls' responsibility to cover up as not to be distracting for their hormone-infused male peers. By absolving male students of any part or responsibility in how they perceive the female body, the dress code takes on the assumption that boys will be boys, or it's locker room talk. This reasoning is not at all innocent. It does not serve to protect the girls, since it propagates slut shaming. and is not a legitimate attempt by school administrators to establish an appropriate learning environment because of its dangerous applications outside of the classroom. One of the clearest examples of this logic behind the dress code is the phenomenon of rape culture, in which women who have suffered rape, sexual assault, or harassment are told they were asking for it because of what they were wearing. Just as with dress codes, public discourse about rape questions, the choices the woman made instead of the man. The Williamson County School dress code needs to be changed. The Brentwood Middle School dress code needs to be burned. And the Williamson County School Board should make it their policy that no school should have a dress code that perpetuates rape culture. I have handed out blue folders with more information in there and information and stats from the CDC. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ashley Button.
Hello. My name is Ashley Button, and I live at 177 Carenbridge Way in Franklin. And tonight I'm speaking in support of student religious liberty. And first, I'd like to thank you all for providing me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. First time here. I am a WCS parent this year, yay, and a District 4 constituent. And I just wanted to come and let you know that I do welcome the clarifying policies concerning religious liberty in our schools. I understand that there are already laws in place. However, it's important for those who work in our schools and for those who attend our schools to understand where the line is for freedom of religion in the context of the school environment. And I think that in this case, clarification of religious liberties within WCS is both necessary and valuable. As a longtime human resource professional, I've been in for over 15 years, and many of those years I've worked in education. And as a director of human resources for a school district, making policy. And I can tell you from experience that unfortunately we cannot rely solely on common sense and statute to protect the districts from lawsuits where this is concerned. If statute were easily interpreted, our need for lawyers and courts would be greatly reduced. I do understand the contention that this vote would be largely symbolic, as this is indeed covered by state law, and I do look forward to seeing where each of you stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Grant.
My name is Jason Grant. I live at 1626 Oak Hall Drive, Brentwood, Tennessee. I am also in favor of freedom of speech and the exercise of religion. However, I am not in favor of these policy modifications. In my opinion, the way that they are written currently leads to the potential for unintended and unnecessary conflict in our schools, ostracization of certain groups within our schools, and unintended lawsuits by the very people who probably are very much in support of these changes. Student religious liberties and the disruption of educational process is kind of a gray area. What is disruptive? At what point do you cross that line where it becomes disruptive if you're exercising under these policy guidelines as written your freedom of religion? Religion is very different than non-religion. Many religions teach that their religion is the only true religion. That creates a potentially hostile learning environment for our students that, again, in the intent of the policy as written, was not the intention, but actually will be the likely result. Permitting passing out religious literature within the school facilities is problematic because the topic of equal treatment and/or time can create unnecessary claims of discrimination against one religion or another. The provision with respect to when parents can sue within this policy is fallacious at best. Parents can sue at any time they choose to. They're not bound by Williamson County School Board policy. They're parents. The display of religious symbol as written is very biased towards the Judeo-Christian faiths. No mention of any other religions exists. It does not promote the globally relevant, inclusive nature of what our school system should be. The display exception for traditional winter holidays is pretty clear in its intent to exclude all other holidays that rotate or are celebrated outside of the winter season. Celebrating religious holidays is not currently allowed under the current policy that is being modified. But under the new policy, placing a cross in front of the classroom during the Christmas season is allowed as long as a picture of Santa accompanies it. It allows, again, the promotion of one religion over another, not the intent of the policy writers, but the actual result. Teach religious liberties, wearing symbols or other garb, what is disruptive and what is not disruptive again. How do you define disruptive when wearing one t-shirt over another? Is it the size, the shape, the message? What's too large? What's too small? What's just right? And then lastly, is there really a problem in Williamson County schools? I can't think of any single instance where anyone from our school system has sued the school system for lack of their students' ability to exercise their free rights. Current policy on the study of religious holidays is sufficient as written, but when you modify it, the policy eliminates the fundamental meaning and its intent. There are much bigger issues to tackle in this, and I encourage you to table the proposal, or at the very least, rewrite them to be inclusive of all students, all religions, and be neutral with respect to holiday preferences. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Sarah Olson.
Hello, I'm Sarah Olson, and like Ashley, I am a very first-timer here, and I'm so impressed because she has little bitties just starting. I'm at the other tail end. We have 5 children, all of whom have been touched in some way, shape, or form by the public schools here in Williamson County, and I am very grateful for the work that you all do. I come from a long line of educators. My father was a school superintendent. My mother was a teacher for years and years and years, as was my grandmother, my sister, my son, and my sister-in-law has been the, I don't know who is the president of the school board, but my sister-in-law has been the president of 2 of them concurrently up in Wisconsin. So I am a longtime lover of the public schools and a product of the public schools. I want to just say how this policy caused confusion in my own family back in 1995. So the good news is that pre-exists all of your tenure here, so everybody's off the hook. But from my perspective, our very firstborn came home from kindergarten. He went to Crockett Elementary. All I know is his teacher did not say this. I just don't know which teacher said this. But he opened his little lunchbox and started to say grace over his meal, and his teacher told him that could not be done in the public schools, that that's something that was made to be done at home. Oh, that was like a knife in my heart. That just like went to the core of who I am. At the very foundational core, that's who I am. And I respectfully disagree with Jason, who I'm sad to see him leave, because I would have loved to have talked to him. My faith can't be taken on and off, and I would no more want that to be true of anyone of any faith, Jewish, Muslim. If we're going to ask people to take off their Christian faith, take off the cross they wear, then we need to ask to take off hijabs. And of course that's not reasonable, because for somebody of the Muslim faith, that's an act of obedience, and it's an act of decorum. And so for me, that foundationally needs to be clarified, that everyone would have the freedom to express their faith and who they believe themselves to be. I wanted to just throw out, I went on the Williamson County School Board website. It was fantastic. I saw all kinds of policies. There was the Be Nice policy, the bus policy, the lice policy, cheating policy, school calendar, the rumor mill. Oh my gosh, that's the best part of the whole thing. Loved it. But if we're going to have all these other things clarified, it just, for the sake of clarity, we're not making law here. We're just revealing law and making it accessible to parents. I have been the mom that has worked sometimes 60 or 80 hours in a week. It is hard to track with everything that's important to our families. So I'm asking you to make this accessible for all families. America didn't create religious liberty. Religious liberty created America. So thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is William Hargraves.
Thank you. My name is William Hargraves. I live at 2857 Cochrane Trace Drive in Spring Hill. This is my first meeting to attend of the Williamson County School Board. I came because of the proposed resolution on religious liberty in the classroom. Years ago, I was president of the local school board, so I know how important it is to get public input. I would like to register my support for the resolution in favor of religious liberty. For 16 years, I've felt that the Williamson County School Board was a stronghold and bulwark against the intrusion of anti-culture in the classroom. It appears that might be changing, which is terribly detrimental to the future of our education for future leaders. I ask for your approval of the resolution that's proposed as it currently stands. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That ends our public comment section of our meeting this evening. The next item on the agenda is communications to the board, the superintendent's report. Dr. Looney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, good to see you this evening. Tonight, Rebecca has been passing around proposed dates for the school board retreat. If you have not seen that tonight, please make sure that you see it tonight and sign up for whichever of those dates best suit your business or personal needs. In addition, I would like to point out that at your station you have the latest enrollment report, and that was run as of today. Our total enrollment, including the pre-K program, is 38,276 students. 38,276 students. With that being said, I would like to report that district operations are going very well. Mrs. Birdsong, the very capable Ms. Birdsong, is here to help us celebrate some wonderful students and staff members.
Board members, so excited tonight because we are actually celebrating 2 national award winners. It is rare that we get to really celebrate national award winners, but tonight we are celebrating 2. The first one is McKenna Martin. McKenna graduated from Franklin last year, but she was just honored with a National Student Production Award through the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. We honored her last spring for a state award. Her work then was sent to the national level. She is a student at USC pursuing her dreams of filmmaking and such. Her teacher at Franklin, Carrie Thompson. And from Ravenwood High School, this is Mitch Mullins. Mitch won a National Student Production Award for animation, graphics, and special effects. His teacher is Shane Shoemake. So excited for them. Mitch is a student at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And also excited tonight to celebrate yet another perfect ACT score. This is Alexander Chin, a senior at Brentwood High School, and he just scored perfect on his ACT back in September. In athletics, we have a state champion in golf from Brentwood High School. This is Trenton Johnson, only a sophomore, I might add, and he won the TSSAA Class 3A State Boys Individual Golf Championship. His coach is Bud Robinson. And at the middle school level, from Fairview Middle School, this is the TMSAA State Boys Class A Cross Country Championship team. Team members, William Perry, Mason Dowdy, Jose Perez, Ryan Keaton, Matthew Andrea, Rylan Skelton, and Marco Pohl. Their coaches, Preston Brooks and Allie Larry. And again, from Fairview Middle School, congratulations to all of our students.
Mr. Chairman, board members, that completes my report.
Anyone have any questions for Dr. Looney at this time? Any comments? Okay, I see none. Next item is the board chairman's report. I want to remind you about the Tennessee School Board Association Annual Conference, which is going to be held at Opryland Hotel, Friday, November 4th, Saturday, November 5th, Sunday, November 6th, and on Monday, November 7th. Rebecca sent around notice to you about signing up. Please get with her as soon as possible if you are wanting to attend any of these meetings. For those of you who are new to the board or have never been to these conferences, they are full of lots and lots of school board information for you. So if you can make it, it would be a good opportunity to get exposed to all of those things that are happening statewide, not just here in Williamson County. The next item I want to talk about is one of our students at Page High. His name is Hunter Spivey, and Hunter is an area student that was honored by TSBA as one of the 9 districts. TSBA has the same districts that the state does, and he was honored as the 2016 Mid-Cumberland District winner, and currently he is a senior at Page High. Hunter actively volunteers with his church to serve homeless men during the room in the inn by providing clothing, food, and shelter. He also volunteers to help with a variety of fundraising events at his church, including the annual Seminarian Education Dinner, Mardi Gras Dinner, and Pancake Breakfast. Annually, Hunter participates on a mission trip called Servio Deo to hurricane-ravaged Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. He serves as a school cleanup volunteer and assists with the Page High School Letters from Santa fundraiser. Hunter also serves as a Blue Crew captain for his school's mentoring program, as a member of the Life Teen Leadership Team, and as a class representative on the student council. It was really nice to have one of our students representing us and honored by Tennessee School Board Association. So congratulations to Hunter and congratulations to Page High. Thank you for all you've done for our community. The last thing is what Dr. Looney said about the board retreat. We want to start the retreat sort of midday to get some time, since we are looking at a Monday or a Tuesday, roughly 1 o'clock-ish, so we can have enough time to meet. We had all kinds of dates that we presented. We couldn't get enough people at any one, so we're trying to grab these last 2 dates in early November. So if you would, please sign up for one of those dates. If you can't, you can't, but I think it's been passed around. I think you have the list now? Okay, great. So if you would see her after the meeting then to sign up for those if you haven't had a chance to do so. That ends my report. Any questions about anything for me? All right, then we're moving on to new business. New business is 2016-17 school board budget. Dr. Looney, would you go ahead and take us through the general purpose school fund resolution on new positions?
Yes, sir. Thank you, board members. This is a resolution requesting $63,608 for 2 new positions, one to work in the transportation department to facilitate improved communications, and the second one to work with Mrs. Nunley, which is our planning department, to prepare for the expansive amount of work that we're going to be doing as it relates to student growth. I do recommend approval of this resolution.
Anyone like to make a motion for approval of this? Moved by Mr. Hall, second by Mr. Wimberly. Any discussion, comments, or questions? Okay, I see none. It is Dr. Looney's recommendation, so if you'd go ahead and record your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
All right, thank you, Dr. Looney. If you'd go through the next one, which is 2016-17 Education Capital Projects Fund Amendment, Master Plan, Page Area Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. As you know, we've discussed this for a couple of months now. We have completed the master planning documents, at least in large part, for Franklin High School and Brentwood High School. As I had previously committed to you, Page Middle School and Page High School seem to me the next 2 schools in line for this type of planning. I do recommend approval of this expenditure for up to $25,000.
Anyone like to make a motion for this? Move for a motion by Mr. Cash. Anyone like to second it? Second. And we have a second by Ms. Emerson. Any comments, questions, discussions? I see none. It is Dr. Looney's recommendation. If you go ahead and record your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board. Next item is the 2016-17 Education Capital Projects Fund Amendment Master Plan for Brentwood High School. Dr. Looney.
Yes, sir. Prior to making my recommendation, I want to thank the board members that were able to participate in the community meetings relating to this master planning process. Really was excited to hear the community's input, and I think that we have a product that we can work with. The community at the last meeting gave some really good input about the facade of the building and making some minor adjustments. But on the whole, there seemed to be a broad-based consensus of how to proceed. And as you know, this work takes some time. Mr. Fortney reported that it's going to be multiple months for an architect to be able to design documents. This obviously does not include approval for the construction, but prior to construction beginning, we have to get started on the design work. So whether the county commission funds it immediately or somewhere down the line, I think this is a good investment, and we can at least have the planning documents done so that we can begin construction as soon as we get construction dollars. I do recommend approval of this expenditure.
I'd like to make a motion for this.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Hullett. Anyone like to second this? Second. I heard over here. Jay. Mr. Galbraith. Any further questions, discussions on this one? I see Dr. Burgos. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, Dr. Looney, if you would mind commenting on why Brentwood, we have moved ahead and Franklin is not yet requesting to have the architectural fees. If you would clarify that for the community, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, ma'am. As you are likely, you were at the meeting, so we had a community meeting at Franklin High School as well. The customer or the parent feedback that we received, which was much more complex and detailed, and so in order to determine how to best to proceed, it's just going to require some additional time to focus and study on the project. I do think that I'll be coming forward next month with at least a portion of the funds needed to move forward at Franklin High School, in particular the Columbia State property. But we have a little bit of work to do before we get there.
Thank you, Dr. Looney.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hullett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take a moment to reiterate what Dr. Looney had said, and I wanted to thank our Brentwood community for their time and their engagement and their input in this process. It wasn't just the last meeting, but it's been since the first meeting. It's been quite some time as we've been going through it with all the calls and the emails and the conversations that we've had, and everyone was just so positive in moving it forward, and I think we've got a really good product. We're really looking forward to it, so thanks to the board as well for your support.
Thank you. I don't see any others. We have a motion, a second, and a recommendation for Dr. Looney. If y'all ready to go ahead and record your votes at this time.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. The next item is 2016-17 General Purpose School Fund Amendment, LEAP. Dr. Looney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. This is a pretty straightforward item. We receive LEAP funds from the state. It's a grant for $75,000 to be used at Centennial High School. I do recommend approval.
Anyone like to make a motion for this one? Motion for approval from Dr. Burgos, second. Second by Mr. Hall. Any discussions or comments? Okay, I see none. We have Dr. Looney's recommendation. If you'd go ahead and record your votes at this time, please.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, Board. The next item we have is a 2016-2017 Extended School Program Fund Amendment for new sites. Dr. Looney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. You may recall this. When we were going through the budgeting process, we learned late in the process that we were going to add some additional SAC schools. In other words, schools were going to convert from the Y program to the SAC program. And rather than delaying the budgeting process, we decided we were going to bring this to you at a later time. I will remind you, though, that the SAC program, the Extended School Program, is a self-funded program. There are no tax dollars utilized, so this all comes from fees. I do recommend your approval.
Anyone like to make a motion for this? Motion for Ms. Emerson,
Second.
second for Mr. Hullett. Any comments or questions? And Mr. Hullett,
I just want to say,
you're on. Now you are.
No, I'm on. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that for public consumption, that SAC is a wonderful program for morning and afternoon care, and also just wanted to thank Denise Goodwin for her leadership. It falls under her umbrella, and for her leadership of the program and this expansive project and all the good that it does for our boys and girls. So thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and Dr. Looney's recommendation. I see no further discussion. If you go ahead and record your votes at this time.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, Board. Our next item is 6 new business B, bus driver pay adjustment. Dr. Looney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm really excited about the prospect of you approving this. As you know, we've been working really hard for the last at least 15 months or so to try to acquire enough bus drivers, to recruit enough bus drivers to run our routes on time. We haven't been successful. And so we've tried a lot of different out-of-the-box types of things, but at the end of the day, it appears that pay is the only way to attract the number of bus drivers that we need. When I tweeted this information out that it was coming to you, the phone started ringing, and we're really excited about that. Whether it's enough or not, I don't know, but the prospect of the phone ringing and getting additional applicants and qualified drivers into our district, I know has to be appealing to our parents, because you're fielding as many calls as I am. And so I'm proposing that we adjust the beginning pay for bus drivers from $14.72 an hour to $17.25 an hour, and to make our highest pay lane from $17.22 an hour to $24.05 an hour. Do you recommend your approval?
Anyone like to make a motion for this? We have a motion from Mr. Wimberly, second from Mr. Cash. Any discussions? I see the board lighting up. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Looney, can you give a little bit of, I guess, well, my question is around years of experience or years of employment. So if you had a bus driver that came in from someplace else with 10 years of experience, what would be the pay that we would start them at?
The pay lanes there are for years of experience as a bus driver, not for any other profession.
Okay, but irregardless of what district?
Yes, sir.
Regardless of what district?
Independent of the district.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I will say that we have some bus drivers with experience because our pay chart didn't include raises throughout time. So we have bus drivers that have 27 or 28 years of experience that are making above the $24.05 an hour. So the way this memo reads is it's to the next, it's adjusted to your pay lane or a 2% increase, whichever is greatest. So everybody will get some increase.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Looney, we talked a little bit, well, we talked a lot about this at the work session, and I'm completely supportive. I think this will do much to incentivize new bus drivers to come on board. Can you tell the public? I know just there's parents out there with kids who, and we've obviously had some troubles with the bus shortage and getting buses there on time. I was excited to hear about some of your plans that you're going to be coming out with shortly. So, could you share with them what we talked about on Thursday?
Well, we continue to look for solutions. One of the solutions we're looking at right now is by clustering the buses by a high school cluster, for the lack of a better word, to run multiple routes. So basically, and I'll use Nolensville as the example, run all the buses to Nolensville High School to begin with, and then run those same buses to the middle schools that feed Nolensville High School, and then to the elementary school. So we can use, instead of having some buses go that way and some buses go that way for elementary, middle, we send them all serving the same school configuration. So we shorten the route, and that might very well include us manipulating start time slightly. In fact, I know it will. How much, I don't know, and we'll be bringing that to you in November.
But I guess in your sample, does that necessarily reduce the average time spent on the bus?
Well, I don't know if I can speak to that. I do know that it eliminates, our modeling eliminates all the double routes in the Nolensville zone at this point in time. So we want to make, we want to triple check it and quadruple check it before we do that. But I think that solution, along with adding additional drivers, is probably the only viable solution that we can see midterm.
Mr. Cash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say on behalf of the bus drivers and to some of those folks out there that think this is a gravy job, I speak with quite a few of the bus drivers, and it's a tough job. Loading, unloading kids, you see them each and every day. You hear their stories as they're going by. You've got possibly disruptions in the bus. You're driving to and from a school. We are transporting 25,000 students every morning and every afternoon. And they're responsible, and when they leave the house and get in their bus, it's crunch time. And I know there's issues that should not happen with busing, but on average, if a bus is 5 or 10 minutes late, I just encourage folks to say and look at the traffic situation and ask themselves if I'm 5 or 10 minutes late. And they drive down a lot of roads that are just no shoulders. I call them wagon paths with asphalt on them. And they do a darn good job delivering our kids safely and for the most part on time. And whoever's in control, don't move my bus driver.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments on this? Okay, I see none. We have Dr. Looney's recommendation on this new attempt at getting us more bus drivers. So if you go ahead and record your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Okay, a little commercial here. Anyone in the audience is interested in being a bus driver, Miss Rebecca Owens right up here. Anyone at home, if you're listening, bus drivers, Miss Rebecca Owens in the Human Resource Department is looking for some good, qualified people to drive our school buses. Thank you. Didn't have to pay for that one, Dr. Looney.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, our next item is our School Board Code of Ethics. This is an annual agenda item that we established many, many, many years ago. We had a code of ethics for our board before the state required a code of ethics. What we do every year at the October meeting is we have board members read a couple sections, a couple lines out of it, and we pass around the code of ethics for each person to sign. So I'm going to pass this down. We'll start all the way down over there, and we'll start with District 1. If you would please read the Article 1, Section 1 and 2, and then the next, and then Dan, if you'd read next Section 1 and 2 of Article 2, and then Elliot 3 and 4, etc. And we just read 2 sections at a time. Okay, let me turn your mic on. All right, board members, you're all live. Go ahead.
Section 1 of Article 1, my relations to our students, says that I will at all times think in terms of students first, always determining other important things according to how they affect the education and development of students.
Section 2, I will seek to provide equal opportunities for all students in academics, the arts, and athletics.
Article 2, Section 1, I will fairly appraise and support both present and future educational needs.
I will represent at all times the entire school community and refuse to represent special interests or partisan politics.
Section 3, I will maintain open lines of communications with the community.
Section 4, I will refrain from using district resources to actively campaign for any candidate for elected office.
Article 3, my relations to our district employees. Section 1, I will support the employment of those persons best qualified to serve in our district.
Section 2, I will strive to secure resources that allow our employees to perform with excellence.
Section 3, I will celebrate employee accomplishments and refrain from public critique.
Article 4, my relations with other board members. Section 1, I will recognize that authority rests only with the board in official meetings and that the individual member has no legal status outside of such meetings.
Section 2, I will at all times comply with the Tennessee Open Meetings Act, the Sunshine Law.
Section 3, I will make final decisions only after full discussion of matters at a board meeting.
Section 4, I will respect the opinion of other members and will accept the principle of majority rule.
Section 5, I will attend all regularly scheduled board meetings insofar as possible and become informed concerning the issues to be considered at those meetings.
Section 6, I will work with other board members to establish effective board policies and to delegate authority for the administration of the schools to the superintendent.
Section 7, I will refrain from public critique of fellow board members.
Article 5, my relations with our superintendent. Section 1, I will support full administrative authority as well as responsibility for the superintendent to properly discharge all professional duties.
Section 2, I will support superintendent accountability for working and requiring staff to work within the framework of policies set by the board.
Section 3, I will refer all complaints and concerns to the superintendent.
Section 4, I will refrain from public critique of the superintendent outside board deliberations.
Article 6, my relations to myself. Section 1, I will inform myself about my duties and responsibilities and current educational issues by individual study and thorough participation in programs providing needed information.
Section 2, I will avoid being placed in a position of conflict of interest.
Section 3, I will refrain from using my position on the board for personal or partisan gain.
Section 4, I will take no action that will compromise the board, the district, or administration.
Section 5, I will respect the confidentiality of information that is privileged under applicable law.
Thank you, board members, for taking the opportunity to read aloud for the public to hear that. I believe we have posters down here that have our code of ethics written out for people to see, and we'll go ahead and sign it and pass it around. There's no motion. Okay, our esteemed attorney says we need a motion to adopt the code of ethics. So anyone like to make a motion to adopt it?
I so move. Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Hullett, second from Ms. McGraw. Any discussion about it? Okay, I see none. If you'd go ahead then and record your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Okay, thank you, board members. The next item we have is board policies first reading. The first one is 4.6051, credit requirements for graduation. Dr. Looney, would you like to start us on that?
I would. My recommendation is a little bit long-winded, so I apologize in advance. I've given all of these policies considerable thought, in particular after the extensive debate that the board had last week. Most of you know that I'm a man of faith and a former retired Marine, and so
Credit requirements for graduation.
oh, I'm trying to jump ahead to the big ones. Well, this one's easy. I do recommend approval of the revision for policy 4.6051. Hold the phone.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Wimberly, and second I heard over here, Mr. Mitchell. All right. Dr. Looney, would you like to make a recommendation on this one?
I recommend approval. I just made a rear end of myself.
All right. Any further discussion or comments on this one? Okay, I see none. If you go ahead and record your votes then, please.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Okay, the next one is 4.607 on homework. We've already had a preview of that, Dr. Looney, so go ahead, if you would, please.
As I was saying, thank you, board members. This is a matter that's very, very serious, obviously, and sensitive. And I do want to make sure that our students and our employees know exactly what their rights and privileges are. Ironically, today, and I sent you a copy of it, I actually signed an attestation to the state attesting to the fact that we will not promote any policy that prevents or otherwise denies participation in constitutionally protected prayer in public elementary and secondary schools. As I stated in the work session, the reality of our work is people don't refer to the policy manual unless they absolutely have to. Most teachers go to their administrator and say, what is the rule on this? How can I do this? Every year we provide training to our principals about a host of legal issues, including this one, primarily because we typically get letters from people on both sides of the issue, making sure they tell us basically, you better follow the law or we're going to sue you. So we do a good job of making sure we follow the law, generally. I can't tell you with 100% certainty that there has never been a case where the law hasn't been followed, but I can tell you that a policy will not assure that the law was followed or make sure, or the opposite of that. I think it really is about communication. And as I think about the policy manual and what good policy governance is, the rule of thumb is that you want your policy manual to be very short, very thin, few pages, that has the non-negotiables for you doing the work every day. And this issue does not present itself every day in our schools, and that's why they typically go to principals. But I also struggle because it's an important issue, and we should make sure that people understand what it is. So I actually am not supportive of the policy, but I'm very supportive of doing something else. And it was actually brought up at the last meeting. I think it's so important that we should have it on our webpage. It should be something that everybody goes to our webpage to look at what we're about. Put a disclosure on our webpage with links to the law instead of somebody digging through a 4-inch binder looking for a policy that may or may not say what they need them to say, because these proposed policies simply recite the law. And so I think we would be better off having a bold statement on the website that says we don't discriminate, we don't inhibit anybody's religious rights, and then list the laws. From my perspective, I think it addresses the spirit of Dr. Burgos' intent, but it doesn't bury it in a 4-inch binder in policy. The policies, if you decide to pass it, they're not going to do any harm, but I don't know that there's any value added. It certainly doesn't help with the clarification, because students don't go to the policy manual. Parents don't go to the policy manual unless we direct them to the policy manual, and our employees go to their supervisors for explanation. So I honestly think the better approach is let's put it front and center on our webpage so everybody has access to it, because that's where people go these days. So I do not recommend approval of the policy, but I would ask the board to support me in putting it on our website.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Looney. Would anyone like to comment on this policy? Dr. Burgos. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. We need a motion first. Anyone like to make a motion for this?
I move to approve.
We have a motion from Dr. Burgos. Anyone like to second? Second from Ms. Emerson. Dr. Burgos, I presume you want to speak to this issue, right?
I would love to, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Go right ahead.
First, I want to thank the members of the community that came out to speak to us tonight. It's very impressive, and we love to hear from the community. And for those who emailed during the week, there were several who did that and probably couldn't come to the meeting. But I just wanted to thank you all. We love hearing from the community. And for the benefit of the public, I wanted to outline the steps that took place and the process which led up to the creation of these policies. Last legislative session, a new law was passed mandating that all school districts develop a policy, quote, regarding the appropriate inclusion of religion in local curriculum and instructional materials, unquote. We were directed to lay out in policy that any inclusion of religion, quote, shall be for educational purposes only and shall not be used to proselytize or establish any religion or religious belief, unquote. So even though we felt confident that our teachers already do this well, we complied and adopted a new policy by the start of this current school year. During the process, it became apparent to me that our district has policies addressing the first clause of the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause as it's referred to, but not the second half of that same amendment, which outlines prohibition of limiting people's, quote, freedom of expressions of their faiths. So then I researched existing laws on religious freedom and asked Mr. Golden, our Deputy Assistant Superintendent and attorney, if he would craft policy based on these protections. Because if we have policies in place that address what teachers and students may not do when it comes to religious expression in our public school, what we lack are policies that clearly communicate what they may do under existing law. Religious liberty in our schools is a two-sided coin. On one side is prohibited behavior, and on the other is permissible behavior. The policies I'm proposing this evening help us to present a balanced approach, to not just have policies in place which address what is prohibited, but also what is permitted. So what we will be voting on tonight presents that work. And quite honestly, and I'll summarize now, I believe the purpose of these policies are threefold. One, I believe they help protect the religious freedoms of all public school students and employees. Two, I believe they help to protect our school district from frivolous lawsuits. And thirdly, I do believe they would clarify and clearly communicate to students and teachers what their religious freedoms are. And I would like to hear from others before I do any further speaking.
Thank you. Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually enjoyed I enjoyed the discussion. I found it very informative. I love to hear everybody's viewpoints, and I in this case, I really have exercised. I don't know where it is on the code of ethics. I don't memorize the sections, but it does say that we're not to make up our mind prematurely before we've come to vote. So I try to practice that, and as such, I'm still. I still don't have this is such a difficult issue. I'm not, I'm still to be persuaded if I hear a great argument either way. What I reached out to Mr. Golden today and just asked trying to get consensus on this, because it sounded like everybody, I didn't hear anybody who was against religious freedom, religious liberty. At our session, it seems to come about what's the best way to communicate it in forms of board policy, right? And so I was just wondering, since our policy is to direct you, Dr. Looney, as a superintendent, on how to best comply with the law, and currently you're doing this. You're doing this on your own without any direction to the board, and without any, I guess, necessarily accountability or transparency to the public as far as what measures are we taking to ensure that that we are in compliance. And so I was just wondering if it's possible to, and would be agreeable to this, to draft a policy rather than these simply showing what the training that you do provide on an annual basis for these laws, and to put it in policy that we will put the website, the links on the website as you stated. Is that I mean, we're basically doing what you either are doing now or what you asked us to do earlier, as far as, or what you told us you were going to do earlier as far as putting it on the website. Just wanted to get your thoughts.
Well, I obviously haven't processed that. I think the website, to state in policy that we're going to put stuff on the website, you know, I guess you can do it. I'm not sure you have to have a policy to do that. The training aspect of it, I actually would be supportive of a policy that requires the director of schools to coordinate professional development relating certainly to this. I don't know that it has to be I don't know that it has to be exclusively this, but certainly I think that's appropriate. So each year, the board, I have the board vote in November by law that we're fully compliant with all rules, laws, and regulations of the state of Tennessee. So I am not only beholden to you, but I am legally beholden to the state to enforce the laws, which is why I signed this document today. You know, I think if I am interpreting the will of the maker of these proposed policies, it's really about communicating, I think, the laws and making sure that everybody understands what the rules of the game are. And once again, I think that to put it in policy, administrators look at policy manuals. Teachers and students and parents typically don't. And so I'm not sure you would be accomplishing what you want to accomplish, but I will tell you, this is completely the board's decision, and I'm not beating on the desk saying don't put this in policy. I just don't think it accomplishes as effectively what you want to accomplish, that we could do it another way. I hope that answers your question.
That's fine.
Mr. Hollett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking forward to hearing what Ms. McGraw says after this as well, because I enjoyed what she had said at the work session on Thursday. First, we all just have to realize this is a passionate issue. No matter what your faith is in, it's your faith. And your faith is a very personal, sometimes private issue. And one of the things about this is it's not just about communication. In some of the emails that I've received, it's about the gist behind it, the force behind it is that this board needs to make a statement, that this board has to take a stand. And if I can share with you, I see some shaking their head, but I'll share with you. Tonight we heard someone say that this was that the threat, or that our religious liberties were under an imminent threat. We also heard someone say that if we don't do this, then we know that you're doing it for other motives. And I'm going to come back to that in a second with another one. I think that if we move forward with this, we are managing to the exception. And we have been doing this from time to time over the last few years, and it needs to stop. We are managing to the few instead of to the mass. And it's important that we think of everyone in here. And I know that you might be thinking in your perception it is to everyone, but it's not. It doesn't need to exist, and I'll give you a civics lesson in just a moment. While I was driving here tonight, I was taking my 11-year-old to football practice, and on the way there, I was explaining to him what we were going to be discussing tonight, because he's very involved and he wants to know. And I said, well, one of the things is that it would say that if, and it was actually mentioned here tonight from someone who said that they had to take off a cross. And I actually used that perception and I said, well, it's to make sure that you could wear a shirt with a cross on it. And I was about to go on, and he stopped me and goes, we can already do that. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he explained it to me, how he knew that they have their freedom of speech and that they should not feel bad about that they can wear that shirt if they want to. I'll give you this, and it's, again, this is a passionate issue. We all received an email today from a former board member, and I'm going to read this to you because this is the way my perception is that it comes off from those who are, not all, but from some of those who are supporting this. And it's part of a civics lesson. So from this board member, and I'm going to quote it, I'm going to read it. It said, the vote tonight will be viewed by the public as a vote, in all caps, in favor of religious liberty and free speech for our students, or a vote, in all caps, against religious liberty and free speech. There is no other way to view it, exclamation point. Your vote tonight will be seen through that lens, and rightly so. As an elected representative of your district, you either, all caps, support the rights of the children you represent to bring their Bible to school, to pray or wish their classmate happy Hanukkah, or you, all caps, oppose these rights. Your vote tonight will be seen as your opinion on this matter. That is false, patently false. We are not voting on religious liberty. Our religious liberty is intact. It is guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States of America. And the First Amendment under the Bill of Rights, and I'll read it because Dr. Burgos said earlier, it is Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And then it goes on. I'll read the rest of it, period. It could have just ended right there for this discussion tonight, period. Done. We are safe. We can do that. But it continues, says, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. It's the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights. So I can't support this tonight because I do believe the other side of this is I do believe that it invites trouble. It shines a white-hot spotlight on this district and can invite unintended consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Ms. McGraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we had a lot of discussion about this at the work session, and I too found it really beneficial. And I think it's probably been a while since we've had, and maybe not because it's only been a year for me, since there's been a robust discussion about the point of policy and why we set it and what our role is as school board members. And I appreciate Chairman Anderson's efforts to restructure how we bring policies to light and consider them, because our time and our staff's time is very valuable and precious and not infinite. So when Chairman Anderson asked me to take on the role of policy chair, I read the TSBA policy training manual from front to back. It's very, very dryly written. I don't recommend it. But it's very clear about what policy is and isn't. And for the TSBA, as the Tennessee School Board Association, all of us go through extensive hours and hours of TSBA training to prepare us for our roles to be effective board members. And it's very, policy, period, is to delegate authority to the superintendent. That's it. The entire point is to tell Dr. Looney how to operate the schools. And it's also very, very, very clear in exact words that says it is not for clarification of state laws or communication. That is not the role of policy. The role of policy is to delegate that authority and tell them how to run our schools. And we already must and do ensure that every single right that we have is protected. If that is not happening, and there are issues in our schools that are happening, my first question will always be, does Dr. Looney know about that? Someone's ringing. So if something is going on right now and state law is not being followed in the district, that has to be raised to the people that can control it, because those rights are fundamentally protected. And I am frankly, as an American who values religious freedom deeply, very thankful that it's not left up to local school boards to be setting policy around such fundamental rights, because I think that in itself is a risky proposition. You know, TSBA says policies must not repeat what can be found elsewhere, meaning state laws. It doesn't say must not repeat what can be found elsewhere unless it's really, really important. And this is really important, but this is a slippery slope when it comes to deciding we want to take this state law and reiterate it in our policy, but there's all these other rights that are protected as well, and they don't need to be in our policy. Where do we draw that line as to what goes in our policy manual and what doesn't? If you talk to parents with kids with special needs, there are hundreds and hundreds of pages in state law and codes protecting their children's rights and their rights as parents. And I can tell you there are issues with that every single day in every single school because it is so confusing. And there does need to be communication and there does need to be education. But the recommendation is not to take those laws and put them in our policy. That doesn't solve the problem. I think there is an opportunity here, as Dr. Looney has said, to better educate people as to what their rights are. And we can do that, and I think it's important. But I don't think putting this in a policy manual, A, does anything. It's not intended to communicate what your rights are, and I think it's setting a dangerous precedent that we don't want to consume district time and energy deciding what goes in our policy and what doesn't, just because the state law, you know, is an area of confusion for some portion of our population. So I'd ask everyone to consider that. I think we need education and training and open communication, and that goes both ways. If parents and students are confused about what their rights are, ask somebody and be proactive about getting clarification, because that's why we have professionals here that are trained every single year to help clear that up for you. So I'm not supporting these policy changes only because every single thing mentioned in there is already a right guaranteed to us and to our students and our parents and our teachers. And I just don't want to set a precedent about what policy is intended to do and focus our policy making on areas that are actually gaps in directing the operation of our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to thank all the individuals who spoke tonight. I hope this will not be your last time to come and share your guidance with us. It makes us a better board, and it really is the whole point of why we're here. Yeah, I usually don't have a hard time being heard. So thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to come and speak to us. It means it's very valuable to me personally, for sure. And I want to thank Dr. Burgos for bringing forward this engaging subject. We would not have been having this conversation both on our board or in the community without you putting yourself out there for that, and so I appreciate you doing that. One of the rules, I believe, or one of the challenges, I think, of an elected official is to create legislation or feel the need to create legislation. We hear examples of elected officials all the time, critiques of elected officials saying how many bills have they authored or co-sponsored or sponsored, and I don't think there's any of us in here, or I don't believe that there's a shortage of laws that we have to be aware of. And so I think that it's important as an elected official that we are careful not to just create rules and legislation because we think that's what we were elected to do. That we've got to make sure that we're fixing a problem or we're addressing a need that is not already addressed. I think education, what I'm hearing and what I've read is it's all about education and all about both from the students, from the community, especially from a teacher and administration standpoint. So I would be supportive of figuring out what we can do on a recurring basis to make sure that the religious freedoms and rights of students and staff and community, that our staff knows what that is. I, as a 30-year employee of corporate America, I have to take annual test, literally test, to prove that I'm proficient in the ethics rules of my corporation, that I understand what the internet usage rules of my corporation are, what I can be dismissed for versus what I can't be, how to handle employees and you know, ethics violations, whether I commit them or just observe them. And so I don't know if the school system has a recurring education process that's administered and the staff is required to sign off on for that, but I think this is an example of something I believe that could be added to a recurring, whether you do it yearly or every 3 years or something, to say, give use cases is what we refer to it as, specific examples. Is this allowed or is this not allowed? Or if you see this happen, what should you do about it? And maybe add that into our continuing education. I think communication to parents and community, like we're doing with our Parents' Bill of Rights, is where it all needs to be. We need to double down on that, whether we put it on a website, whether we create written publications to hand out at open houses or something of that nature. I think that's important as well. I don't feel that adding this to the policy book is meeting the intent of that. And so that's my concern, that we go back, we're not creating any new rules or regulations or any new prohibitions, but we are adding an additional verbiage to our existing rules. And so I don't see the problem that we're fixing there. And so therefore that's my concern with how we're trying to solve this education problem with this particular approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have had, as a new board member, thoughts about, as a policymaking body, what are the criteria and threshold for creating or refining existing policy. And one of the things I look at when I look at the policies is how long have they been around, how long have the laws been around. You know, some of the things we've talked about have been in place for a long time, and this is a law that's been in place since 1997. And you know, just so that out of my concern for that, I looked at also what policies we have in place right now that are kind of restating existing statute verbatim, and I couldn't find any, and we have a lot of policies that are out there. I do appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion because I think it's important to know and for people to understand that students can pray at school, vocally or silently. They can express religious viewpoints. They can share those religious viewpoints. They can possess and distribute religious literature. They can observe religious holidays. That's very important. And we have, on the Tennessee Department of Education site, there's a state statutory rights of parents and students. And it's 6 pages long, and there are 39 statutes identified in there. And I don't want us to fall into a policymaking precedent of saying, okay, we need to have 39 new policies that reflect existing law. I don't disagree with the intent of this, and if, as I heard tonight, communication and clarification is the most important goal. I think there are ways that we can and should address that, but maybe not that reach the threshold of creating new policy.
Thank you. Dr. Burgos?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in the spirit of Mr. Galbraith's comments that he could still be swayed, I have been thinking about this all weekend. It is a huge topic, and it is extremely important. And so I too went to the TSBA manual that Ms. McGraw was talking about, because I too want to make sure that we're doing what's right. That's all I want to do. I want to do what's right, but right for everybody. And so if you'll oblige me, I would like to take a few of those arguments that were just put forth and give you my thoughts on them. The first goes right to the TSBA manual. It clearly lays out the role of the board, and that is to govern through policy. We've heard that a gazillion times, and it's truth. That is how we govern. We do very little else, because then the superintendent and his staff carry out by procedures and things of that nature how best to enact that policy. So I want to read to you a few definitions to give you the idea of, because what we're talking about tonight is revising 2 policies and creating 2 new ones. And so I think it is extremely important to understand why. Because that's been the argument I've been hearing the past 10 minutes is, why do we need a new policy? So I'm going to quote from the TSBA policy manual, and that's the Tennessee School Board Association, for those of you who aren't used to the acronym. And I will quote, "Policies are guidelines adopted by the board to chart a course of action. They indicate what the board expects and may include why and how much. They should be broad enough to permit discretionary action by the administration in meeting day-to-day problems, and yet specific enough to give clear guidance," unquote. "They should be based upon established legal precedents or rules." Actually, that's the end quote. In other words, we express through policy what is important to us and our community, and the superintendent and his or her administration develop procedures on how best to accomplish that directive. So I believe, as other board members have told us in the past, because I'm still learning this process as well, but that we are getting into the weeds and out of our role to tell Dr. Looney or his staff how to manage a website or to link laws or how to go about clearly communicating with students and staff their religious freedom rights. That's not our job. That's his job. Our job is to say it's important to us and our community. We want to make sure that it happens, and that's what policy does. I also wanted to read one more quotation from what policies do and why it's important that we create good policy. Again, it's from the TSBA handout you referenced. Quote, policies foster stability and continuity. Board members come and go. Staff people leave, retire, or are separated, but policies endure. Well-written policies help provide for smooth transitions when changes take place. Additionally, fair, consistent, and uniform treatment of all students, parents, community members, and employees is ensured because ambiguity, confusion, and trouble are avoided when policies are adopted, published, and disseminated. Unquote. So that was the reason why I believe policy is correct in this avenue, as opposed to telling them how to go about doing what we asked them to. So I also wanted to address Ms. McGraw's restating of law verbatim from the TSBA. After she raised that objection to the policy proposals, I went ahead and researched where that came from, and right on the bottom of the page, it had a phone number and an email to Ben Torres, who is the staff attorney for the TSBA and the director of governmental relations and policy. So basically, his job is to help school boards write good policy. So I called him and I emailed him because I want to be right on this. I want our district to be doing what's right. And he was so kind, even though it was over the weekend. He emailed me back and we spoke on the phone for a good hour. And he told me that it is true he advises boards to write policy in language that is very easy for its intended audience to understand. The policy itself can often and should reflect current and past laws. But to create a policy that only contains the exact words of a law is often only clear to lawyers. No offense taken, Mr. Golden. He reviewed our policies that Mr. Golden helped craft for us and said that we can certainly adopt them as written. And he complimented our school attorneys as being highly competent. These policies do not put us at risk. He, however, offered to work with us on putting them into our own words so that they clearly communicate the directions that we are desiring to give, directives, that we desire to give to the superintendent and his staff to implement. This frees up our attorneys to work on other important issues, which was one point that was made, and we pay dues to the TSBA. So we certainly can continue to rewrite these. In fact, I was going to ask Mr. Golden if he would be willing to, for clarity's sake, explain where we are in the process of these policies, because there is a 6-step process to create or revise policies. It's very important. And I think it's important we realize where we are in this process. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Golden, could you review that for us quickly?
Sure. There is a policy in our policy manual that addresses how policies are made. And that policy says that policies are discussed twice at the policy committee, twice at work sessions, and twice at the school board meetings. So every policy goes through that 6-step process to be adopted. There are some exceptions. Lawyers always tell you there's exceptions, right? If it's an editorial comment, then the board does have the power to just do that once. I will say that in this particular example, when we're talking about the student religious liberties draft and the employee religious liberties draft, as attorney for the board, my suggestion to you is that it would be a mistake to alter the language of that statute, because that statute is quite clear and concise in how it describes that procedure. And so one of the reasons that when Dr. Burgos came to me with those code sections asking for that to be placed in policy, we actually included the language of the code was because to alter it would not give that any more clarity, in my opinion. I will also tell you that it's a very risky proposition when you're dealing with constitutional issues, as Ms. McGraw stated, to restate in different terminology those rights that are guaranteed through the U.S. Constitution. These rights shift from time to time as new cases come up, as the U.S. Supreme Court addresses particular issues. And in my opinion, it's a mistake to go beyond what we have clearly been given either from the Tennessee Code, the U.S. Code, or through that case law.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. I appreciate that. And that is what Mr. Torres told me. He said, you know, you have excellent attorneys, and there must be a good reason why they chose to just keep the same verbiage in those two particular policies. And he also sent me sample policies that are available to all of us if we want to tweak the other ones. The homework policy, they've got one just like this one that we will eventually get to vote on, that does include student religious rights, because that's a good place to put it. And what I also found interesting in those policies that he shared with me is that one way that school districts, and there are many school districts who have already done this, by the way. Davidson County has policy on this, and a lot of other neighboring counties do as well. But anyway, one of the ways that they have creatively helped to make it clear to the teachers and the students who do not regularly go to the policy manual, absolutely that's true, they will write at the very last sentence of a policy that part of the policy is that a copy of this policy will be provided in the teacher handbook and the student handbook. And so that automatically gets to them, and it helps communicate clearly. But we don't give any other directive. That our administration does an excellent job of this right now. I fully recognize that. But they're not being directed to do that. And that could go away with the superintendent going away, or with staff changing, or with perceptions changing. Unless we put it in policy, we risk that. And one last rebuttal, because there was also the argument that, you know, kind of like if it ain't broke, why fix it, or creating a policy for a problem that doesn't exist, or what problem are we fixing, Mr. Mitchell just asked. And in my opinion, I think it's short-sighted to assume that because Williamson County does not currently have a known problem with religious liberty issues in our public schools, that we will never have one. We may live in a bubble, but we are not immune from lawsuits. And confusion and misunderstanding about the law as it pertains to religious liberty is something many school districts are facing throughout the nation right now. The time to clarify is before a problem arises, not afterwards. And this again, I'm going to quote from the TSBA. This is what it says in that same manual. Quote, each policy should reflect the will of the board. Surprisingly, however, some boards rely on case-by-case approaches to solve their problems. This ensures that they will face many more problems and have more difficulty justifying decisions than boards that establish policies well in advance of anticipated problems. Being proactive and developing policies before they are needed allows the board to debate and determine the merits of an issue without the pressures of personal application, heightened emotions, and time limits that a lawsuit would actually, unquote. But it's referring to being in crisis and trying to develop policies. It's not ever any fun. So I would just say that there are many good reasons why we should put this in policy. It is our job as a board to express the desires of the community and to protect our students' and teachers' rights. And this would allow that to be protected for the duration. As you and I both know, some of our policies date back to the 1970s. You know, decades these policies last. So I'd like to continue to direct our superintendent and his staff and any future administrations to make sure that they continue to protect the rights of our teachers and students and employees of this district. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Mr. Hullett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To tag on to the end of one of the things Dr. Burgos said, Dr. Looney and Mr. Golden, do we have any recorded incidents of complaints being filed for this particular topic? People saying that their students or teachers saying their rights were violated due to religious liberties.
I'll go first. Jason has been here longer than I have, but in the 6 years I've been here, I've not been made aware of one.
I can recall one at an elementary school. Dr. Looney's correct, it quite predates him. I've been here about 10.5 years. a question came up about a child reading the Bible, and we had a conversation with the teacher, made sure she understood her role as a government entity. I will say, as to policies from a board perspective, Bill Squires and I are attorneys for the board. We will and we will write policies to try to affect the intent of you all as board members so that you can take this to your peers, and that's what we did in this case.
The point I'm trying to make is that, you know, within recent memory, and at least during Dr. Looney's time with us, when you grab a shovel and start digging to find a problem, eventually the problem you find is that you're in a hole you can't get out of. And we had a lot of anecdotal perceptions brought to us tonight, and I value those, and I know it's passionate and you're engaged and everything else, but not once do I hear, oh, it was WCS, or it was this, or oh, it was at this elementary school last week, or within a year. It's usually something, and you say, where did that happen? Oh, it was in Georgia. Where did that happen? Oh, it was somewhere else, and it was outside of here. And again, looking for a problem that doesn't exist can create the problem. And we did have a lot of anecdotal perception, so I'll leave you with one as I close out. My pastor likes to say this from time to time, and he says, you know, people are always telling me that they're taking God out of schools. And he goes, that's just not true. He said, I can prove it. Do you know why? Do I know why? He said, as long as there are math tests, God will always be in the classroom.
Thank you. Ms. Emerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that one of the things that's been overlooked is that there clearly is a lot of concern from the public about this issue. And contrary to what Mr. Hullett just said, I don't think we are looking for a problem. I think in light of the concern and the attention that the public has enabled us to see tonight, it is being proactive in terms of precluding a problem. There's absolutely no harm in clarifying the position that we all have and the freedom that we have to be able to express that religious freedom in the classroom. And I think by trying to restrict that and trying to prevent that from happening, I think you're sending a very dangerous message. I believe that the idea of being on the website is excellent, and I think that could certainly be something that could happen. But the reality of it is, I agree with Dr. Burgos that you're not going to be here forever, Dr. Looney. None of us are. And I think it's important that we make a stand on what is right, not only for our county, but part of how our nation was founded. And it needs to be in policy, so it cannot be shuffled off or just dusted under the rug and forgotten about. And I think that Dr. Burgos and Dr. Golden have done a very good job of trying to write the policy in ways that are user-friendly, that are very clear, and that will help preclude a lot of misunderstanding. There needs to be clarity about this. And I believe strongly that we would be making a serious misstep if we overlook what the public has clearly said they're interested in having. And this is just representative of a small group of people that feel the same way. I mean, I've got emails, I've had calls about this. And again, I think you may not see the benefit, but there will be a huge benefit for the public in knowing that we have done this, that it's going to be lasting, that it will outlive us, and that it's there for a very good reason. We are in perilous times. Things are changing really quickly, and there's an awful lot of concern about religious freedoms. I think that we as a board need to be proactive in making that declaration that we support them and what they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Ms. Durham.
Thank you, and Beth, Dr. Burgos, thank you so much for all the work you've put into it. And I mean, it's really obvious to me, sitting here listening to everybody, that there's so much interest in seeing something done. And I like what Ms. Emerson said, which is that, you know, we're not going to be around forever. So like you're saying, just putting it on the website might not satisfy the needs long term. I do have a question for Mr. Golden. In your opinion, do the policies protect us above and beyond our adherence to the laws? As one of the speakers said, you know, we want to do this as a preventative measure to avoid lawsuit. Does this help us even more so than general adherence?
It doesn't change the law, and I would advise the board never to change the law when it comes to First Amendment issues. It doesn't, it won't change the way we as an administration enforce those laws. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. I think I heard what Ms. Debbie said about, you know, we want to do something as a preventative measure to avoid lawsuit. And so I kept thinking, you know, is this really the right thing to do, or is more broader education the way to address it, and perhaps a broader policy that states, you know, that we as Williamson County Schools support and uphold all state statutory rights of parents and students in all Tennessee Department of Education. I just wonder if there's a broader policy that could be put into place that addresses not just the religious aspect, but like Ann was discussing, the special, you know, needs group access. There's so many other issues that I feel like kind of get missed if we don't have a broader policy. That's number one. And number two, there's so much interest from all these people and so much discussion. I almost feel like it needs a step back and a better evaluation of what's the best policy to put into place. And maybe, you know, I hear what you're saying about not wanting to change the way some statutes read, and then what Dr. Burgos is saying about the TSBA representative's recommendation not to restate. There's just so many, it seems like there might just be more time invested. And I just wonder if this is an opportunity for a strategic plan, you know, item as you're developing that, Dr. Looney. Just add it as another thing that we take some time to look at, just so we don't give the appearance of violating Section 2 and Article 2, which is representing special interests. You know, we should represent all interests, and the statutes and the laws represent so many more things than religion. So I don't know, that's a lot of information, but I just think that maybe there's a better way to go about it. And I completely agree that it's confusing. And before I joined the board, I would have not known there was a policy. You know, I didn't really ever reference the policies, number one, and definitely didn't ever look at laws to know my rights. So definitely think there needs to be something done. Not sure that these particular policies are the right way to go about doing it.
Thank you. Ms. McGraw.
I'd like to call the question.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Golden, would you please state for the board what the calling of the question means?
Call for the question takes a second and a vote. Robert's rules call for a 2/3 majority, but under state law, all board votes require a simple majority, and it's not debatable.
Okay, would anyone like to second the motion of calling the question?
Second.
Okay, we have a second from Mr. Wimberly. Okay, and there's no debate on this, correct? Correct, so we're just taking a vote. Do we need to do it, the voice vote? Okay, you ready for a voice vote?
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
Are we talking about all 5 of these policies at once?
Just one.
Or just on the first one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to call the question. It's non-debatable. We'll take a roll call vote on that. If you'd go ahead and ask.
Angela Durham.
So, yeah, the nature of a call for a question is to end debate on the matter that's on the floor.
Dan Cash. Elliot Mitchell.
No.
Ann McGraw.
Yes.
Gary Anderson.
Yes.
Jay Galbraith,
Yes.
Robert Hullett,
Yes.
Candy Emerson, Rick Wimberly,
Yes.
Beth Burgos, Casey Hall. 5 no, 6 yes.
Okay, we have 6 yes to call the question and 5 no. That means the question is called, so we're ready then to take a vote. Is that correct, Mr. Golden?
That's correct.
Okay, do we have Dr. Looney's recommendation on this?
Yes, sir. I recommend that the board decline moving forward with this policy.
Okay, so you're voting on just the first policy that we're discussing tonight on first reading, 4.607 homework. And as I said, it's first reading. A positive vote moves it forward. A negative vote ends discussion about this policy, and we revert back to the original policy. Is that correct, Mr. Golden?
That's correct.
Okay. We all ready to vote? If you would. We have questions?
First reading.
Just first reading of policy 4.607.
Your vote is 4 yes, 7 no.
Okay, this policy did not pass, so we're ready to move on to our next policy. It's 4.803, student religious liberties. Dr. Looney.
I recommend that we decline moving forward with this policy.
Anyone like to make a motion to put this one on the floor? Motion for approval from Dr. Burgos. Second by Mr. Cash. Okay, discussions. Dr. Burgos, is this a carryover from last time since I didn't clear the board? Okay, you're up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I just wanted to state my opinion on calling to question. I think it is wonderful when people are just restating the things that they have already said. I think that's very valid because we tend to do that at times. I do not, however, think free speech should ever be squelched. And if one or more board members still have requests up there to speak and they have other points they'd like to make, I think that that is not the appropriate time for call to question. I just thought I would let you know my opinion on that. Because what I was going to say, which now I can say for this particular one, is that we need to remember that this is just the first reading. And the whole reason we have 6 steps to go through policy is exactly what Ms. Durham was talking about. It takes time. We need to debate the merits. We need to go back to policy committee. We need to talk about what the policy staff person at the TSBA said, and he wants to offer his services to help us with these policies. I think it would be short-sighted to just kill these now when there's this much interest, and I do believe it's such a very important topic. So I would like for us to keep in mind that, for instance, okay, so we're going to talk about each policy. I'm not going to give another dissertation, I promise. But this particular policy that we're about to vote on, one of the feedback points that Mr. Ben Torres, the attorney at TSBA, gave me was he likes things to be a little bit more concise, and this is a little wordy, and you could take out the preamble, so to speak. And what that is it basically says why the policy is being written. He said it's good just to have policy get right to the directive. You know, you're just trying to communicate to the superintendent and his staff what it is that you would like to see enacted. So this particular policy says, I'll just read the preamble part. The Tennessee General Assembly enacted the Tennessee Student Religious Liberty Act of 1997 as a result of their finding that there have been confusion surrounding judicial decisions concerning religion, free speech, and public education. In keeping with that finding, the Williamson County Board of Education has established this policy to more fully communicate to its students their religious freedoms guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution and related laws. Okay, that could go away. I don't have any problem, you know, if we go back to policy. And so the rest of this policy is basically what Mr. Haas stated during his argument, that, yeah, it would be really great if, you know, we make sure that all of our kids know this, because putting it in the student policy, student handbook, then they would know right off the bat. Some of us educate our kids well about religious liberties if we have the passion, for instance, that I do. My kids get tired of hearing about this stuff. But not everybody knows their religious liberties. And I'm not just talking Christians. This is about Jewish people, Hindu, Buddhists, Muslim, and atheists. Everybody in the United States has the same right to express or not express their religious freedom. And so all this policy, the intent of it is to make sure that our kids know what their rights are so that they don't feel that their free speech would be squelched, because we know what peer pressure is like, and it's much easier not to speak than to have the courage and speak. And if this gives even one child the courage to speak, then I think it's worth it. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Mr. Wimberly, I had you on my board, but you're not on that board. Okay. All right, Mr. Hullett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also in policy, part of the process is if a policy should not move forward to a second reading, it should not move forward to a second reading. That is my belief. It doesn't discount all the work and all the passion and all the engagement that Dr. Burgos has had, and I do value that. But in my opinion, that's and for this policy and the next two, I believe we'll just be restating themes that we stated for nearly an hour. Actually, it was an hour for one policy. And we're all passionate about it, but I don't think anything is going to be much different. So respectfully, I call the question.
Okay, Mr. Golden.
Takes a second, Mr. Chair, and then it's not debatable.
We have a second from Ann McGraw. Not debatable, so we take a vote on this one to see if we call the question on policy 4.803. Okay, we need to do a voice vote again. Okay, if you go ahead.
Angela Durham? Dan Cash? No. Elliot Mitchell?
No.
Ann McGraw?
Yes.
Gary Anderson?
Yes.
Jay Galbraith?
Yes.
Robert Hullett?
Yes.
Candy Emerson?
No.
Rick Wimberly?
Yes.
Beth Burgos?
No.
Casey Hall?
No.
6 yes, 5 no's.
Okay, so the vote is to call the question. Therefore, we have a motion and a second. We have Dr. Looney's recommendation on student religious liberties 4.803 first reading. And then are we ready to take a vote on that now? If you would, go ahead and record your votes.
Your vote is 4 yes, 7 no.
Okay, then we are ready to, let's see, call a vote on this. We have voted on this already, so we're done. So we're ready to move on to the next one. I'm sorry. All right, the next policy is 4.8041, the study of religious holidays. Dr. Looney?
Religious liberty.
I recommend that we do not proceed.
We do. We need to have a motion on this now. We have a motion from Dr. Burgos. Second by Mr. Hall. Okay, ready for discussions? Mr. Hullett.
Respectfully, I'd like to call the question.
Point of order. Is it, can you call questions before the motion and second individuals have a right to speak by moving for a document? That person should, by Robert's rules, have first right to speak, and the person who seconds it basically gets second.
That is correct
options.
under Robert's rules.
Okay, so what you're saying to us, Mr. Golden, is that we cannot call a question until the person making the motion has the opportunity to speak first?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, so Dr. Burgos?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am stunned. We need to be respectful to one another. We are not going to speak on and on and on for hours, but to call the question before any board member has the opportunity to even speak, I think is against exactly what we're talking about. But I will try to calm myself. This particular policy is different than the other ones. And the reason I say that, this is real important to hear. This is an existing policy that we have had that we went ahead and, if you'll scroll up a little bit, please, Mr. King. And then a little bit farther, one more time. These parts of the policy were in this previous policy before all of this discussion came up, including being able to have music with a variety of sections, including sacred music. This is from our original policy. And if you just blatantly, because of what's gone on tonight, decide you don't want any of these to move forward, you will be eliminating previous existing policy that we felt very important and that Mr. Gaddis felt very important, needed to remain in policy. So this is not one that I have created as new. This is one of our existing policies, which is why I needed to be able to tell you that. So we need to move this one forward, or we will lose that out of our policy manual. If you want to have further discussion in the policy committee about the other things that are in there, the other laws that give the teachers and the students the ability to say Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah, because 2 years ago the legislators wanted to make sure that everybody knew that was permissible because of all the PC stuff going on. Fine, we can have that debate. But this policy existed prior to this entire debate, and to not allow it to move forward, I believe, would be a large disservice to our arts department, and you need to please be aware of that.
Thank you. Dr. Burrows is done. Okay, Ann McGraw, I believe, is next. Sorry, the board that's up there is not the one that's on my screen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Burgos. I'm not on. I shouldn't touch things. I'm on.
You're on.
Speak for Ann.
I can't speak that loud. Dan's on.
She's on.
Am I on?
You're on.
Gotta take Dan off.
I have. And yours is showing on my screen that you're on. You want to try again? Tell you what, I'm gonna clear everybody.
And then try it back on.
Try it.
Does this work?
I'll turn his on.
All right.
It shows.
Can you hear me now?
Shows she's on.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Dr. Burgos. That was a really important point about this specific policy, so I'm glad you said that. I think, honestly, I think this is exactly the reason, if I had to guess, that TSBA recommends we not get mired down in policy discussions about restating or rephrasing state law, because it appears to the public that what we're doing is changing something, and we're not. Nothing in these new policies, with the exception of this one, which we need to keep a part of it in there for the school-sponsored choral programs, nothing is changing. And I think what happens is a change in policy indicates a change in how the schools are operating. And this is when the public gets alerted, and there's media coverage, and there's headlines, and they start thinking something is happening that is not good. But nothing is changing with regards to our religious freedoms in schools and how we operate our schools in regards to protecting those freedoms. And I really want to emphasize that I understand the passion from the public around this right now, because it feels like we're doing something to these rights. I knocked on a lot of doors this summer. I made calls. I had a lot of people knocking on doors, and anytime I asked them what worried about them with schools or what was going on, and it was a lot of parents, this did not come up once. That does not mean religious freedom is not important to those people. If I had asked any of them, I guarantee you 90-something% would have said, of course, protect my religious freedoms. It is important to almost everyone, I'm sure of it. What I heard the public say was they do not want this board spending time on things that don't affect the schools. And in this instance, we are doing a good job of this. We really are. And I don't subscribe to the mantra, don't fix it if it's not broken. I think sometimes you should fix things before they break, absolutely. But in this case, we're not fixing anything. Like, this wording in these policies does not fix a potential problem because it doesn't change how we operate the schools. So if we need to better communicate and we need to better educate, let's please spend our district's time on that. I don't want to spend many more months rehashing this and taking up valuable district time given the very, very challenging problems we do have to fix. And so that's why I appreciate the intent of this, and I think it's spawned a very meaningful discussion, but the amount of time that we're spending on this is, it's valuable and it's important, and I don't think this is what the public expects from us. I just want to reiterate, like, nothing is changing by leaving this in or taking it out. I would like to make a motion, if I can, that we amend this policy so that only the school-sponsored programs section stays in, if we are able to do that. Because we have to have that. Dr. Burgos is absolutely right. Is it possible to make that amendment?
You can make that amendment. I will say our practice has been through the policy development policy
Right.
to pass something on for first reading and then let the policy committee handle that.
And this is time sensitive though, isn't it, for the holiday programs, or are we covered for this year?
Well, we're at first reading regardless.
Okay.
So it's
We'll
gonna,
probably already missed that boat.
it's going to have to, you know,
Okay.
the November meeting is when it would come up.
And they've probably already, okay.
Yeah.
So would your advice be then, based on practices, to leave it as is for the vote?
Well, generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
I think you've articulated some of your concerns with this, and I think it is an appropriate discussion at the policy committee meeting. I will say that Mr. Squires has been leading that policy committee meeting discussion regarding this particular policy. So I'd like to defer to him on his opinion based upon the changes that the board made a few months ago at a time that actually predates the time many of you were sitting here. So I thought it might be some valuable for him to educate you on where we are.
I got your mic on, Mr. Squires.
I think my mic is working. Yes, it is. It's difficult for me to say without having the actual policy in front of me, but we've had some discussion about 4.804 as I'm doing this from memory. The original 4.804 and the original 4.8041 as we modified some things. If you recall, we made some changes to that very first policy early on, and then we moved this policy into the 4.8041 position so that it could be there to modify as we went forward from there. It is true that Mr. Gaddis has expressed a need, and I think it's a valuable need, to have the statement that music programs, for instance, can include sacred music in the choral programs. Having said that, that statement can be in either of those two policies, so I don't know that it's critical that it be in this one. This policy, the changes here try to address several things kind of at one time. If you'll scroll down and you'll see, there's the treatment of religious holidays. There's also some statements here about religious symbols as they're used, and we had some discussion at the work session about that. So some of that you see, the numbered 1 and number 2 are incorporations of Supreme Court ideals from different cases. One of those would be the County of Allegheny via ACLU. Another one is what we think of as the plastic reindeer or the endorsement test. But as it relates to that particular, you see the statement there at the end, concerts or school programs can include sacred music. That statement is important to be there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be in this policy in this fashion. Does that make sense? It could also be in the other policy as well, which is not a problem.
Okay. Board members, if I could procedurally I'm going to turn off all the request to speak, because what's up on the board is nothing like this on the screen here. So I'm going to try to clear all of them. And they cleared it here, but not there. So then I'll follow. There it goes. Okay. All right. So if you'd please go ahead and push your button again if you request to speak. Okay. We have Mr. Wimberly.
I'm not sure I followed you completely, Mr. Squires, but it seems like to me that it would be reasonable for us to approve this policy, so indeed it can be placed back into the policy committee forum, and how it comes out from there is up to policy.
Sure. I think what I was trying to say in a more succinct kind of fashion is, if you're only passing this policy because of the statement about sacred music at choral programs, that's not the reason. My suggestion would be, that's really not the reason to address and pass this policy. That statement can go in several places. I don't think it's going to be an issue for this year, but I think that this policy, to me, addresses lots of other things that are more important than that single statement. Certainly your suggestion to send it back to policy is a viable one as well, to be addressed there.
Thank you. Dr. Looney asked to speak.
Board members, I'd like to call your attention to line number 18 of the proposed policy, remembering that the black text is the text in its current form. If you do not adopt the blue, then the black text stays intact. The black text says concerts or school programs should include a variety of selections and may include sacred music. So if you do not adopt this proposed change, then that portion remains intact.
Okay. Mr. Wimberly, do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, I want to thank Dr. Looney. That was my question. Exactly. So appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say, when you, some of you folks got the ball, you ran with it tonight. And I think it's pretty unfair when I've heard from pretty much all board members, some undecided, some looking at possibly tweaking the policy. There's been offers of policies from the TVSA and whatnot, and when we vote on these policies, and if it's voted down, it's dead. These are serious issues. I think these issues need a little bit more attention, and I think there's a lot more board members that agree with that statement than just shutting it down. This policy here covers, the one we're talking about now, covers every faith there is. And if you get into the schools over the holidays and whatnot, you'll see the different costumes. You'll hear different songs from every faith. So what's wrong with this? I guess that's my question. I just don't see what the big deal is here. But to call the question right out of the chute isn't right, and I guess a lot more dialogue should have been on this the other night, because I'm with some other board members too. I feel we should be prepared for tonight, and the dialogue should have been the other night. But this has went on, and I think it should. I wouldn't even know how to do it. Just make a motion to look at these policies again, now that people have a little bit more insight to what's going on. I agree with some of the folks in here that there may be other means to address the issue of getting the word out and displays, handbooks, in focus, whatever, on the web page. But I think people need to really discuss this and understand what's happening here. And but I will support this one, and I will support the other ones also, just for the fact that the question's being called, and there's no chance to have any more dialogue on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Hullett?
Well, and thanks, Dan. I waited once we cleared the board. I waited to let everybody else get in there because I didn't just want to jump in. So first, I wanted to apologize to Dr. Burgos because I intended no disrespect by calling the question. But we're already 20 minutes into it, and something you said was patently false. You said if we do not accept this or change this policy, that sacred music goes away. And we just heard that if we vote this down, policy 4.804 is still in effect. And it does say that it may include sacred music. It does not go away. There is no sense of panic. There is no imminent threat. Barbarians are not at the gate. I cannot support this. I realize that it's passionate for everybody else, but I cannot support this. We don't need it. We're inviting trouble.
Dr. Burgos?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a complex issue, and I don't think any of us realized until just now, and when Dr. Looney pointed out to us that, in fact, if we did not let this go forward, that we would lose some things that are very important to our staff. And so I don't think it's ever appropriate to call to question before there's any discussion. I think that's inherently disrespectful. I am not saying it was necessarily directed towards me. I think it's disrespectful to the entire board, Mr. Hollett. But we can certainly agree to disagree, and I do appreciate your attempt at apologizing. So I was just going to, earlier on when I pushed my button, ask about the question that you clarified, Dr. Looney. I, of course, would appreciate this moving forward so that we can actually address these issues that I think are extremely important. But I will not repeat my position again. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to Dr. Looney. Does staff support this policy? What's the recommendation of staff, I guess, is what I'm
Recommendation is to proceed without this policy revision.
Thank you.
Dr. Looney, if the board does not vote with the changes, you made a reference that it goes back to the black printed with the lines through it. It goes back and that still exists?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. Mr. Ha?
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of confusion and discussion about this, and I wouldn't mind getting it back to policy and having more discussion about it, but I really do feel like 4.804 that already is in place currently covers this and addresses the concerns about religious symbols and the sacred music, and unless I'm misunderstanding it, I believe the primary concerns are already in policy.
Thank you. Dr. Burgos?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just realized in reading the black that I did have one problem with the original policy that would go away if we had moved it forward, and that was line 6. It reads, teachers must be alert to the distinction between teaching about religious holidays, which is permissible, and celebrating religious holidays, which is not. And I found that sentence to be a bit disconcerting because does that mean if you become an employee of Williamson County Schools, you may not celebrate your religious holiday? I think it's worth further discussion. I think our teachers' religious rights do not go away that when they become an employee of the school district. I don't think that was intentional, but I don't like that sentence. And I do think this policy could do with some more reworking. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Golden, if the policy doesn't pass what Dr. Burgos just said, would there be an opportunity then to bring that part back for consideration about what she just mentioned?
If this doesn't pass under Robert's rules, if through your process, as you've described it, Mr. Chair, with your plan for the board policies from this point forward, with that caveat that we're following your proposal, a proposed alteration to a policy that is different from the proposed does have the power to be brought back.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Looney?
And I'd like to add, I would be supportive of us bringing that back as an editorial change, Dr. Burgos, for that line. you know, the policy's intended to be interpreted for the classroom, but I could see where that might cause a problem. I would say that this policy's been in effect since 2001 without incident, but I would certainly be supportive and would be willing to bring it back as an editorial change to that policy without question.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, so we have a motion and a second to change the policy by eliminating the language in the black and approving the language that's written in blue. Is that correct? Mr. Golden, Dr. Looney, did I state that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then are we ready for a vote? Okay, if you go ahead and record your votes. Yes.
Am I voting against this policy or in for revision?
If you vote yes, you're voting the policy as changed on the document that you see now. If you vote no, you're voting against that, and then the policy in the black stays as it is, with the understanding that Dr. Looney just said that he would be willing to have it come back for an editorial change on what Dr. Burgos mentioned.
So yes is a vote for the blue.
Yes. Right.
That's correct, as first reading.
Your vote is 6 yes, 5 no.
Okay, this one passes, and we will take this one back to the policy committee for second reading then. All right, our next policy is, let's see, 5.601, employee religious liberties. Hope I got the right one. Dr. Looney?
I recommend that you reject this policy proposal.
Okay, do we have a motion for approval of this one? Dr. Burgos?
Second.
I heard Dan, Mr. Cash before Ms. Emerson, Mr. Cash. All right, anyone like to speak to this one? Dr. Burgos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I again would like to just say I think it would be great benefit for teachers to have this in their in their teacher manual by putting a line at the end of this policy that says a copy of this policy shall go into the teacher manual. Then each teacher would have it at the beginning of the school year. And I also would be in favor, if we do pass this, to get rid of a bunch of the stuff at the front of this policy that's unnecessary and just have it a short, succinct, clarify what the religious rights are of our teachers. I want to support them. I want to protect their rights, and that is the intent of this policy. I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hullett, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, just for clarification, this is the same, unless I'm incorrect, this is the same policy that we voted against earlier, replacing students with employees. Not the very last policy, the policy before that. That one was students, and this is employees.
If I may, not exactly, because it was two separate laws. One was passed in 97, one was passed in 99.
Okay.
One was specific to students, the one in 99 was specific to teachers.
Are they fundamentally the same law, though, just to...
The idea behind it, the reasoning behind it as articulated by the legislature was the same.
Thank you.
Ms. McGraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Golden, is there anything in this policy that's not already covered in state law? That's the law.
No.
Can you use Jay's mic? Yours is not functioning.
Do you need me to ask that again in the mic?
No.
My question was, sorry, is there anything in this policy that's not currently covered by state law as a protection for the employees?
No.
Thank you.
And at the same time, if I may, again, I would not recommend adding something that's not already described in either federal or state law.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Golden, my question is around the complaint section here. Do we not have already policy that defines if a employee has a complaint of how they escalated, and I think I talked to you privately about this, that the escalation of to the principal and then immediately to the superintendent seems to be in conflict with our other escalation processes.
That's correct. This law is peculiar to my knowledge in that it has its own appeal procedure. And this proposed policy articulates that because that's exactly the way the law reads. So in this particular peculiar issue, the legislature chose to include an appeal procedure.
So if we were to, so to that point, is there value in this policy strictly from the point that it kind of addresses a one-off appeals procedure for employees?
I think that's really, to me at least, that's been the fundamental issue that the board's been debating over the, on all these, the extent to which the board feels it's necessary to communicate state law in policy. The reality is it's state law, and if it's if an employee chooses to appeal based on the issues described in this law, then they have that appeal right. So it's difficult to answer your question, because we haven't recommended this in the past, 18, 19 years since this was passed, actually 17 in this particular case. So the administration has not recommended this since this was passed in '99. So will it hurt or change anything? Like Dr. Looney said, it won't, because that's already in place.
Thank you.
Mr. Galbraith.
Mr. Golden, I'd just like to get clarification on the proposed 4.803. Is the appeals process is the same, and it's also different than our current appeals process for the student? It looks to be the same. Only there's a parent provision in there. It looks like it's adding a.
Yeah, it seems apparent to me that what the legislature did in '99 was address employee rights in the same format that they did 2 years prior to that with student rights related to religious liberties.
So I just want to make sure if someone, whether it's the student or the teacher, if someone appeals or files a complaint and they do it through our ordinary course of complaint that's in that's our normal policy and procedure, would it be in violation of this statute?
They wouldn't be violating it, but we would still have the burden, as described in number 3, to respond within that 30 days.
I guess our normal course of action is to provide a complaint directly to the principal. And in this case, it says go directly to the superintendent.
I see your point. And so this particular code section says an employee alleging a violation of these rights shall go to the school's principal, number 1. Number 2, if the concerns aren't resolved, then make a complaint in writing to the superintendent of schools.
Okay, my mistake. I was reading the student policy, in which case they're supposed. No, my fault. I was reading it wrong. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Just again, as the stated concern was confusion and perhaps lack of communication, I'd be remiss if I didn't take advantage of this microphone and the opportunity to say that Williamson County employees have the right to read a religious book during non-instructional time, quietly say grace before a meal, wear religious garb or jewelry that does not disrupt the school environment, and meet with other school employees for prayer or scriptural study before or after school or during the employee's lunch period. And just whether this passes or not, I just wanted to make that clear so that everybody understands that that is what they are allowed to do, whether this passes or not.
Okay, anyone else would like to speak to this policy? This policy, then, Dr. Burgos?
For the last time, I'm there's one more point that I wanted to make that I have had a lot of discussion, as I've mentioned, over this weekend with several different people. And one particular previous state senator spoke with me, and he said that it's interesting that the federal government, if you start looking at the point of why would you create a policy where you already have a state law and a federal law and the U.S. Constitution, right? So coming from the top, why would the federal government want to make a law where the U.S. Constitution's already clear? Well, they do because they want to have jurisdiction over that, to be able to enforce it. And then why would the state, because that's what the state did, why would they create a law for our state that is already law in federal government and U.S. Constitution? He said, because then you can enforce it. Then you have jurisdiction over it if you own it, if it's yours. And he said, in the same way, if you make policy, then basically you have the jurisdiction to be able to enforce it and to back up your employees and your teacher. Because quite frankly, if there's a violation of one of these, the state attorneys aren't going to come support our teachers. You know, there's not going to be any enforcement from the state or the federal government if one of these things are violated. I would like to have the backs of our teachers. If it's our policy, if it's our policy, then we will be protecting our teachers because we said that we would. And so that's why there's redundancy in the law at every level, because it has to do with jurisdiction. It gives you the power then to enforce that policy or that law. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McGraw?
Thank you. That's, in response to that, I would love to hear Mr. Golden's opinion. Does this give us additional jurisdiction or give our teachers additional rights that they don't already have? Will this new wording make it easier for us to protect our teachers' rights?
We enforce the federal laws applicable to us. We enforce the state laws applicable to us. We enforce board policy applicable to us. We're going to enforce the state law whether or not you all pass this policy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further discussion on this one? Okay, we're going to be voting on first reading for policy 5.601, employee religious liberties. Dr. Looney recommended against this one. If you go ahead and record your votes.
Your vote is 4 yes, 7 no.
Okay. This one does not pass. We're on to the next item, which is policy 6.305, complaints and grievances. Dr. Looney.
Thank you, board members. I actually had a discussion with legal counsel today about this particular proposal. At this time, I'm going to recommend that the board decline this policy proposal.
Okay, anyone like to make a motion? Dr. Burgos made a motion to approve. Second, anyone? I'm sorry, Mr. Hall, second. Okay, Dr. Burgos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I'm not mistaken, and Mr. Golden, if I am, please correct me. The reason that this came up is because Mr. Squires recognized that if indeed we passed the policies that we just killed, then we would need to have this policy because the state laws actually lay out a different grievance policy for religious liberties than our current grievance policy. So this was basically an amendment that needed to be made in that line, and I recommend that that we make an amendment that says, except as otherwise required by law, comma, the Williamson County Board, because board policy at this point has not been passed that would go against our current grievance process, but those state laws do. And so I believe we still need to have that line in there, because when it comes to religious liberties, there is code how you're supposed to do it, and our grievance process is slightly different. And so that's why I believe that this particular policy got put on the docket. And I suppose actually, Mr. Squires, you might be the one that would answer to that.
Mr. Squires, would you like to respond?
Certainly. You're correct. This first caught my eye because of the other policies and their unusual sort of grievance process. Just looking through, I realized we would end up with not conflicting, but policies in our own manual that didn't quite match up. That's where this recommendation originally came from. From my perspective as a lawyer, I think if you're going to give that sort of caveat that says except as otherwise required, saying by law and board policy both is perfectly fine, because you might later have a board policy that has something in it. It's actually, with those two policies not moving forward, from my perspective, it's really up to you all as to whether or not you want to do this. If this policy doesn't quite match the state law procedure, the state law procedure is what we would follow if that kind of complaint came up anyway. So in other words, it would be overridden by the state law that controls it. So it's certainly up to you all as to how you want to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Burgos, did you want to say anything else to that?
No, I just want to thank Mr. Squires for catching it. And actually, I think it still has value because it does clarify. It can be very confusing if there's different grievance processes. It would clarify that obviously, you know, there are other issues where there are different grievance policies. And so I think it helps clarify. I think it may still have some value from that standpoint. And it also might protect if we do create board policy in the future that has a different grievance policy embedded in it. So, thank you.
Mr. Hullett?
Point of order, Dr. Burgos had made the suggestion of an amendment before we got into all of that, and so before I did this, I was going to see if you wanted to. I will retract that. Okay.
Okay, so what you have then is the original motion, as you stated. Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just because Dr. Burgos's microphone was off at that moment,
It's back on.
I will retract my amendment that I stated a few moments earlier.
Okay, Mr.
Okay.
Hullett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question where we were speaking, someone mentioned this policy not being in line with state law, but I don't believe that's correct. Is this policy in line with state law?
Are you asking?
Mr. Golden or Mr. Squires? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, Mr. Golden worked on the policy that you all were looking at earlier. I think this is slightly different, though, than that grievance procedure. That grievance procedure, as I recall it, sends you to the principal and then straight to the superintendent. Then it imposes some certain timelines for an investigation, et cetera, et cetera. Those things are really not represented here in that same fashion.
Okay, and then another question. If, because I'm either way on this, if we don't approve it, if we don't move forward with it, is there any harm done, Mr. Golden?
There's really no harm done. Mr. Squires is the one who recommended this, and I thought his recommendation was a wise recommendation, given where we were with the other proposed policies. As I stated before, the reality is we're going to follow the law, unless we make a mistake. This is, if you read this policy, it's a pretty narrow policy. It's about students appealing non-disciplinary decisions made by the administration of the school, and you can see that process. From my perspective, I've been here 10 years, and I've never seen this policy used. In that sense, I wonder about its value. But from your question, I don't. As I sit here today at this stage, I don't have a problem with it continuing either as written, or leave it alone.
Okay, and then last question. depending on how it goes, if we don't change it, if we move forward and don't change it as recommended by Dr. Looney, it won't matter. But just in case, is it an editorial change, or do we need to make an amendment for the reference at the bottom that links back to the policy that did not pass?
That could be either one. You could do that as editorial. That is within your power if this blue line is accepted by the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Wimberly.
I guess I am totally confused at this point. This seems like a rather benign change to the policy. Dr. Looney, do you have a specific reason for opposing it?
Well, I'd like to defer my comments to Dr. Burgos. To be honest with you, the policy was drafted in light of the other proposed policies which have now failed. So as I indicated to Dr. Burgos, I think there's a merit to us slowing down and having a really good conversation about what the merit of this policy change is, rather than trying to do it on the fly. And given that the other policies were rejected, I think we're kind of trying to make a decision on the fly about this policy. I would recommend that the board have more conversation, and I whispered in Dr. Burgos' ear, and she's shaking her head yes, so I think I'll just shut up and let her talk.
Dr. Burgos?
Wow, I feel powerful. Basically, the recommendation was to go ahead and table this for right now because it does have legal implications and it's complex. And that would allow our legal counselors to have time to discuss the merit of this particular policy. So I move to table this particular policy.
Okay, Mr. Golden, would you please explain to the board what the table motion means?
Tabling is to set something for no certain date. It can be, the nature of that motion is not debatable. It can be brought up on motion in a second and a majority vote to bring it up at any future meeting or at the meeting on which it was tabled. But this being the last item on the agenda, I don't think that's going to happen.
So you're saying this could come back to the policy meeting, does not have to come back here first?
If this is tabled, then it sits on as a possible board agenda item upon a majority vote anytime. The policy committee could, under the rules, through the policy chair, bring this up for discussion on some other item beyond what's here as blue line. But this blue line would actually be tabled. It would not come back to the board until a board member and the board voted to bring it back.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you. I would argue that this, a tabled motion could be brought back, one, by majority vote or the chairman.
Oh, yes.
As well.
That is correct. Thank you for that addition. You are correct.
And to your point, a tabled motion is an active motion. It is sitting available for being brought back for discussion at any point of any new business kind of discussion, and so therefore could also, by the decision of the chairman of the policy committee, I guess, also kind of fall into that same category where they could.
You're correct. There's no strict rule prohibiting that from a policy perspective. I will tell you mentioned the chair, and the nature of this body is the board chair and the superintendent as the executive committee under the code governing schools set the policy, set the agenda, and then the board votes on it. So the natural effect of the board chair bringing it back up will be that it will come before the board as part of the proposed agenda.
But, and again, I'm sorry to belabor the point, but also as we set the agenda of any meeting, this tabled motion could be, the agenda could be modified to bring this motion back up for discussion.
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Dr. Looney wanted to speak.
Mr. Hullett's going to go.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hullett.
I think we could get past all of that much faster. If one of the things we could do is we could withdraw the motion, withdraw it from the agenda, and then just bring it back at the next work session.
I hate to do this, Mr. Chair. The motion to table is not debatable. So.
Okay. Then we need to vote then on the motion to table at this time. We have a motion and a second to table. Dr. Looney has asked me to pause a moment. Dr. Burgos, do you want
My
to-
motion stands. The intent will be to table it till the next meeting, but that is already given in your authority to do that. So I just wanted to provide time for our attorneys to discuss this and make sure that we are approaching this correctly. And so I still would like to continue. I would table it to the next meeting.
Okay, your intent is to table it to the next
Well,
board.
If I may, Mr. Chair, her motion was to table it, and that's the extent of her motion.
And that's fine,
and that's-
because it serves that purpose
Yeah.
either way.
And that's non-debatable. If you had a specific date, that's a different motion, and that is debatable.
Okay.
So we just need a second, and then we
We
can
have a
vote.
second. We have a second from Mr. Mitchell. All right, so we have a motion and second to table. So do we need to take a voice vote, or you're ready for this up here? Okay, if you go ahead and vote on tabling or not tabling.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Okay, that is the last item on our agenda for this evening. I thank everyone for being here, and this meeting is adjourned.